right, welcome back to the Countertop podcast. If you're a returning viewer, or welcome if you are a new viewer. This is a podcast where we kind of all bring topics to the table, go ahead and discuss them, and kind of bounce ideas and opinions back and forth between each other. And just to kind of let everyone know, we are on Spotify, Apple Music, all of the other major um, podcasting websites, as well as video on YouTube. We do have a bunch of other Instagram and Facebook and all those, so please make sure to go give us a follow and a like and comments when you can. So I will kind of talk. I know, Ray, you were gone last week, so we won't ask you any questions on this. But Tanner, any kind of follow-up to our conversation housekeeping from last week?
The only thing I would say is that the
Ray missed out.
no. Besides that, there was a lot on the Oregon law, right? That's come up in passing when talking to family members, and it does seem that not many people have taken the time to look at what the law states, and that the perception, at least as it stands right now, is that Oregon said all drugs are good and you'll never go to jail.
Yeah.
So, just kind of anecdotal evidence, following our conversation where we had to look it up. We talked it through on the last podcast and then throughout this past week on several different occasions. Folks have said, well, you can always be like Oregon and just say, F it, no one goes to jail for anything. You're like, ah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that it did come up, which means it was a good topic, hopefully. But yeah, no, it is, well, and you, even in the news, and it's those clickbait titles, though, too, that Oregon legalized everything. And so that's, I think, a big piece that adds kind of into that to say no one really reads the article. And even we did, and, I think there is some still, without diving a little further, there are some questions that it even caused for us to, look at or question ourselves on it. So... well, if that's all the housekeeping, we'll just jump into it. I'll go ahead and throw out this topic. Hopefully a little fun topic from our heavier episodes that we've had recently. But and as you guys have probably are aware, but there's been recent documents released from the Pentagon over the last 6 months about UFOs and their sightings and kind of so on and so forth with that. Basically, owning up to the fact that there is something out there. We don't know what it is. And my bigger topic wasn't necessarily have you heard about it or what your thoughts are necessarily on that, but I want to also ask kind of what does this change for you, kind of knowing that as a factor in your life, as well as your opinions on UFOs and if you believe it or not, and if the Pentagon's lying or not, so on and so forth. But I just found it interesting, not that, I'm assuming from this group, I'm making assumptions for you guys, but, we probably are reasonable to say that we're all on the same page with saying that UFOs are out there, and some sort of life form is out there. I'm going to make that assumption. You guys can tell me otherwise, but the big thing for me, what does it change?
I mean, until there's more proof or actual contact, I don't think it really changes much. It's still a speculation just because it's not being debunked, and maybe there is some data to support it now. Existing, just because that came out from a government entity, doesn't necessarily mean we're close to that, contact or anything like that, any actual evidence. But I think it's interesting either way that they actually released documents. Like, it just seems so far-fetched that would happen from the government in the first place that I was just surprised it was released at all.
It's not 2020.
Yeah, it's 2020. They can get by with that, and people are like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and they did. I did think that was funny too, because I remember hearing about it when it first came out, but people were so caught up in all of the other stuff going on at the time between election and COVID and everything else that 2020 has brought. It kind of got pushed under the rug by most people, it seems like.
You remember the Australian wildfires?
Yeah.
Yeah, just wondering. I mean, that's kind of what started here. No, so there's an interesting thing, right? So there's a there's a bunch of people who say if the government releases it, it has validity. Also, people, most often than not, the same people say the government hides everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you get this conflict that goes, all right, here is video, here is pilots, here is the lead singer to Blink 182, saying that UFOs exist like he did in his songs, and all along, it's predicated by what you're saying, Brandon, is that yes, in the infinite expanse of the universe, there has to be life that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not that life has, achieved flight, came down here, and
Or the
is,
same, anywhere near the same intelligence that we have. Life
right.
could be anything. Life could be single cell
Yeah.
organisms that they have supposedly found in water on Mars and stuff like that. So
Yeah, in the atmosphere of Uranus and
yeah,
no, it's Saturn. Atmosphere of Saturn, I believe.
Thought you were
But
trying to make
anyway,
a joke there.
no. But just to say, does it change anything? No. I think deep down inside, we're going to be drip fed, lots of information. But even if the government came out tomorrow and said that, oh yeah, here is the actual pictures of the Roswell aliens, and they are held here, and we do have a spacecraft, it wouldn't change anything for me.
no, I mean, the odds of me being able to see that, even if they confirmed its existence, are so slim that
But it
would
doesn't
be
rock anything,
no,
internally. There's not
no,
like this paradigm shift that exists that
no,
goes, oh, it does exist. Well, that's fine. Okay, cool. Um, at least we understand that, hey, leaps in technology may have been attributed by external factors. That's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as far as like chaos, no, fuck it.
yeah. I feel like that's news that's not going to be a paradigm shift for anybody, even someone who was a vehement non-believer in extraterrestrial life. I don't think it would be a pivotal moment in their lives. I feel like they would have the same kind of response to it that we're kind of talking about, as they would just be like, oh, that's cool. I guess I was wrong about that. And then they would just go about with their merry lives and continue doing whatever they were doing before.
I don't know what kind of information or news that we could share with the global community would actually change a paradigm that says we should act better towards one another, and that we shouldn't be so divisive on all of our regional and cultural changes. And I don't think the acknowledgement of extraterrestrials, and I think we have to put a caveat that can travel all the way here and back, right? That's kind of a big caveat,
Yeah.
because everyone should agree there's extraterrestrials. Like, life exists out in the cosmos. Like, that shouldn't be a debatable thing.
Yeah.
Even if it's not intelligent, if it doesn't have spaceships and whatever else, like, okay, something has to live out there. It's like, okay, fine. That's not a controversial thing, I wouldn't think. But I wonder if, even a spaceship rolls up, down comes, what was that funny movie with, Paul?
Oh, yeah.
Space Paul comes down, and you're sitting here going, okay, like an alien exists and we saw him and he's pretty chill. I don't think it would really matter. I don't think anything would really change. I don't think anybody would. There might be a few people that go, oh, but overall, no.
Yeah.
It wouldn't harmonize anything.
Do you think if, say, and we're speculation and throwing out just things, but do you think this would, when I think of disasters, most of the time, especially in the United States, you have patriotism that kind of groups everyone together in a sense. If a attack were to happen, would that change the world's view on, a national standpoint that we all have to work towards protecting ourselves, or do you think
No.
it's still each country for themselves kind of deal?
I think that's how people are going to view it. And that's immediately what popped in my head when he was saying that there's no news that could come out that would be pivotal to anybody. I was thinking the same thing. If they were to come out and say the world is ending tomorrow, people would still take the side of, I need to see if there's anything I can do to prevent this happening to me, and they're not
Mm-hmm.
going to suddenly care about everyone around them and protecting them. I think that just comes down to a lot of indoctrinated human nature to want to protect yourself over anything else.
Well, and it comes back to the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
If you're threatened on those items, you're going to have to take care of those first. It's only
Yeah.
when those items are secured, and which is why a lot of the social program, type of discussions always happen, is saying, let's take care of the basic needs. That way communities can form in togetherness and bonding, where you're not trying to struggle,
Yeah.
because everyone needs, food, shelter, um, clothing, because it's not nice to look at people naked in our culture. But anyway, that's so, like you're saying, if there was going to be an attack, no, it wouldn't join anybody together.
Yeah.
It would be, let's see if those guys could protect me, and if they can protect me, I'm going to go over there. If they can't protect me, then I'm going to protect my little family. That's it. That's what always happens.
And do you think with, finding out more and more about aliens, does that change the perception of, and maybe you guys have, and have you ever had anyone in your, lifetime ever say, I've seen aliens, I've seen UFOs, where as of today, you may have just said that's not real, you're making up a lie. Does that change people's aspect on, all the cases that have always been there that we just assumed were fake?
I think you got to differentiate between aliens and UFOs. I mean, lots of people have seen unidentified flying objects that they're not able to identify and let sensationalism go over there. And normally they have a few beers and they're in the Midwest. So, I would say everyone has experience with people saying that they've seen UFOs. Not many people have ever claimed to see aliens.
Yeah.
There's a few, and I think they're very compelling stories. And I think that, there's a lot of documentaries, TV shows, or whatever that go through those stories a lot better than we could. But I find those entertaining and compelling. That would I dismiss those immediately as saying that they couldn't have happened? No. But I think they, if you also think that UFOs have visited this, this planet and have moved around, then you also have to take with a grain of salt, abductions or whatever else like that. And, do I think they are all true? Hell no. But if you have little bits of evidence, it makes it entertaining.
Yeah.
At least to go, oh, that's interesting. And that's just, far enough from the truth that it, it could be without going too far over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's one of those topics. It was a fun topic. It's interesting to think that, what would change, and I even go further into that, is what would change besides UFOs. Would there be anything that came out that would change your aspect on life? I mean, maybe that's a deeper question to have. Of if UFOs doesn't shock you, what would?
After this year, I really don't know. It's hard to come up with an example on the spot for that question because, I don't know. I feel like I've seen a lot at this point in time.
Yeah, because I mean, the fatalistic view of our solar, it depends on where you want to stop, right? But if you look at our solar system in general of the planet, and you would just say, okay, we know our sun is eventually going to burn out, right? Earth cannot exist forever.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start there. Does that bother you? Well, no. It's not going to be any time in our lifetime, not in our kids' lifetime, not in our kids' lifetime. It's going to be long time down the road.
Yep.
So does that? I mean, that's impending doom. That's fatalist to the to the 100%, but that's 100% true. Okay. Well, we could talk about climate change. Does that scare you? Does that change? Well, I think it makes a lot of people have action and want to do that, but generally, at least half the population in the U.S. says, I don't believe the science.
Yep.
Right? And so you go, okay, that doesn't change it. What might be really interesting, and just to keep it lighter, I think a megalodon, just coming up to the coast next summer, be like, oh shit, dinosaurs were real. They're still around. And by God, there's a monstrous shark. What else could be out there? I think that would be a paradigm shifting thing going, oh shit.
Yeah, I guess.
I think when you talk about the sea,
Well, just to compound on that in general, if there was anything that could put us lower in the food chain than we currently are, I think that would paradigm shift a lot of people.
Yeah.
Huh. Like pterodactyls? That'd be
Yeah.
scary as shit, dude.
Yeah.
Getting picked up by them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I will agree. Anything in the sea, though, because that's one area that we haven't. There's so much out there in the sea that we have not explored. And it's crazy to think about that. We don't know what could be down there. It could be a megalodon that's still living in those types of situations that, you know, you change your outlook on going to the beach. That's
Yeah.
for sure. So,
But I think you summed it up nice, right? Just anything that would put you lower on the food chain would be a
Yeah.
paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we said about aliens too. If they
Yeah.
attack, you're lower down the food chain. That's what makes people shift and go crazy.
Yeah.
Is that your sense of security is lost, or your sense of security, whether it be food, health, location, shelter. That's the kind of things most people will strive to protect the most.
Yeah.
I think most people probably don't care about that news too, just because I think there's a lot of people that would still refute it because of the reasons brought up. Like, a lot of people just don't believe the science of things. There could be, proof that they can't see themselves, whatever you want to call that, inconsequential, whatever the word is for that, that if they don't see it with their own eyes, they're not going to believe it. I mean, look at how many flat earthers are out there.
Yeah.
It's similar to something like that. If it's not something that can be explicitly proven to them, then they're just going to push the limits on whether they believe it or not.
And just to make this topic go out even further, for the only reason is we're actually on the cusp of things that will completely change economies of the globe. Asteroids that are out there that are worth trillions of dollars in raw materials that we're going and actively trying to poke at and capture some and retain, and that would be a paradigm shift. Because if you found a solid gold asteroid that was more gold, X amount more than what's ever existed on Earth, and Joe Bob over there with Space Z, because I don't want to name anybody, he goes over there and grabs it and can continually grab it and continually flood the market of gold. That's no longer precious.
Even,
you know what I mean?
On the other hand, if he did not flood the market of gold and he just hoarded everything, then suddenly the value becomes so ridiculously high, and he then obtained so much additional power due to that, then that could be huge.
Yeah. So, as we go to privatization of space exploration, there is some paradigm shifts that could happen through, gathering of resources or staying claim out there. So that'd be another one to consider.
On another aspect, I guess technology, if we want to talk about Space Z related industries, Neuralink, I've been looking into that a lot since it came out, not doing a lot of research on it, but just interested in the idea. If something like that were to come out, where people would actually be connected to each other via thought and, neural connection, that could be paradigm changing, only because of the aspects of it that could push people to hive mind or something like that, like people are worried about.
Which is not the initial stage of it, but it is, some potential frontier that could be.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
And you guys saw that link I shared as well, following up on the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing.
Yeah.
That was from the New England Journal of Medicine today, that said that they've had their first successful altering of genes that eliminated hereditary diseases. More than 1 year later, they had what did it say there? The monogenic diseases with severe potentially life-threatening manifestations on 2 patients, where they altered it with CRISPR, and it had positive results after a year later. So that, if you eliminate, same as security, we're talking about in paradigm shifting things, if you eliminate hereditary diseases from there, you're going to have less fear, less resources dedicated to security, which is, I think, a better thing overall, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap up that topic. I appreciate you guys having some fun with that one. I wanted a little bit lighter with world ending consequences all at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
Who wants to jump into the next topic?
Ray,
I've
you
got
got
one.
something today? Yeah.
Yeah. um, so recently, the big power company out here, APS, was doing a promo where they were giving out free Nest thermostats to people if they joined their rewards program thing that lets them adjust it during summer months to help overall energy usage, which is
Hmm.
an interesting concept in itself. But I want to go into a different aspect of it. I got the thermostat, joined the program, and I went to install it today and had some issues. I checked Google's website and everything before I even considered getting this thing to make sure my system would be compatible. Looked through all the installation instructions before I got it, so I was ready to go when I got here. I got everything installed and set up and ready to go. And then as soon as I set up the app and connect to the thermostat, it tells me there's issues with the wiring. So I double check it and triple check it. Short of rewiring the system, I couldn't get it figured out and get it working. So I contacted Google's customer service for Nest products, and they walked me through all the same troubleshooting steps that I had just done. They weren't, I exhausted all the options that they gave me. And so it comes down to their product not working as advertised, and their only course of action at the end of this was to consult me to their Nest Pros, which are the installers and troubleshooters that you have to pay to come out and fix the system. Even though, with a meter, I tested all the connections and everything was working as it should have. This comes down to the device just not recognizing it. And so the customer service and support ended there, basically telling me I had to pay one of their contractors to come out and troubleshoot this to get it going, which is a minimum of $100 on a device that I just got for free through the power company. And so the aspect of this that I wanted to bring up is, does a corporation get so big that they're able to make customer service a back burner item, unlike smaller businesses that have to rely so much on customer service to retain a customer? Because a company like Google is so big, they know people are going to go to their products no matter what because they're an industry leader. They don't necessarily have to try so hard on the customer service aspect of it to keep a customer like a smaller company would.
I think 100%. And I don't think it's done by, for the most part, I don't think it's done by choice that they do this. I think it happens over time that they don't put as much effort into affecting change within that. I think a good example is it Comcast. Um, I, you know, if you haven't been hiding under a rock for 5 years, you've probably heard of all the nightmares of Comcast with it being a service and a utility. Um, you know, they were still able to, as of today, that I'm aware of, is basically have complete crap of a customer service department, but still have to have customers because it's a utility, and that's a little bit different between Google and product wise, but I think that's that same boat is that they
Yeah,
don't necessarily
similar
choose
concept.
it, but it's a consequence of just that running a crappy part of that. And then I think it's easier to say let's not fix it. In Google's case, they're then able to make money from a different avenue to
Yeah,
supply. And you being different from all the rest of the people, you feel confident in your troubleshooting skills where someone else may not, and go, well, I'll just pay to have it installed.
yeah, and I did end up fixing it. It took me another 20 minutes of clipping wires and re-inserting them into the device and stuff like that, and it ended up sorting itself out. But I know a lot of people would have stopped where I stopped when I
Yeah.
was frustrated and either hired a pro or went to another company. Although I think the prospect of them going to another company was much slimmer because they already have the device, so they're just going to suck it up and pay the pro to come out and troubleshoot it for them to get this thing installed.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess to your point, it kind of does just come to maybe like an attrition based mindset where a company has so much other stuff going on that it just naturally takes a backseat customer service to product development and other investments.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is the customer service departments in some businesses, and Google may not be one of this, but for Comcast, they kind of got to the point where it was, well, we can't really do anything for you. It's not necessarily the customer service fault that they can't help you, but it may be the service or the item itself that they're just dealing with.
Or
There's
the or the
no
I
perfect
guess it
item.
Yeah, I guess it could come down to the training too. There's a good chance that the troubleshooter that I talked to just didn't have the experience to lead me to other avenues to test, and that's why they recommended the professional. But it just it's weird when they walk you through so many steps of it, and all of a sudden they're just like, well, I can't do anything to help you now. You're gonna have to pay this guy.
What's interesting is both of you went to Google as being the primary responsible party for that program rolled out by your utility company. One of the things that I deal with professional is management of change. And if a new program is rolled out that is offered to customers, even though the product is owned wholly by Google, the utility does have what I would say is a responsibility to not only support the installation, not just provide you a product, because the yes, of course, it would be. I guess it would be not right. There's probably a better word, right? To assume that any of your customers can install a smart thermometer. Now, we're not arguing that the smart thermometers aren't a good option, especially for baseload adjustments, especially during peak seasons or off times demand. I mean, obviously, coming from a utility, I could talk your ear off on as to why that's a good thing and how it supports microgrid solutions and, moving towards a more dynamic, smarter grid. All of that is 100% true, and I support it. But I would say that rather than going to Google, which my topic is an anti-Google thing as well, so don't get wrong there. I would say that the utility, when you roll out a product, even though I say I have a product, right, or a company, and I say, oh, I'm going to give you a new Bic pen, and it arrives to you and doesn't write, I wouldn't expect you to call Bic pen. I would have you call me going, hey, my Bic pen didn't write. You're like, oh, like, here's another one, or let me help you with that, or did you take it out and blow in the end of it? I don't know why that works, but
Yeah, I agree with that aspect of it. I knew going into it, however, that APS wouldn't be of any help because it was plastered all over the website when I went to get this promotional item that if there were any issues with the product itself, they were not going to be the avenue to assist with that. Even though I agree with you that they had it all over their website, which is the only reason I went to Google in the first place.
Yeah, then that's just shitty on them.
Yeah.
I would not agree with them being or that approach to a service offering, because the primary benefit isn't to you as the customer.
Yeah,
the primary benefits to them is the utility to have smarter solutions, and so they're passing over the cost, the hassle, and everything over to you as the consumer, when actually the overall benefit, you're going to be realizing fractions of a cent compared to what they're going to be able to do. Not only that, but baseload generation scheduling is a huge thing. And so if they can get all of that metadata from all of the users around there, saying what time do you typically turn on your lights, to what time do you typically turn on your toaster, and how much inductive load and capacitive load is, done during which type of days, whether it's be turning on your air conditioner or, your swamp cooler, whatever you have out there. But, you generally you're getting so much information that allows them to have a more reliable, smarter grid, that them saying, YOLO, if you want it, fine, but I'm getting all the benefit, they should beat sand.
Yeah, so you want to talk about a company like Comcast being a utility and pigeonholing customers into poor customer service and poor products. APS is known for that out here, not necessarily poor customer service or a poor product, but high rates for little to no increase in energy usage that they can show to anybody, especially with the increase in popularity of solar and APS's own solar farms. That has not led to a rate reduction or anything like that anyone has seen over the last 5 years, that technology has become more prevalent. And then you have that same company going against customers that get solar that want to get off the grid by not allowing them to get off the grid, or charging exorbitant amounts of money if they do want to get off the grid.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one.
Do you have a net metering law there? Like, is there net metering rules that allow them to get fair wages on, kilowatts put back onto the grid?
I think there is out here, because I know a handful of people that have solar that get paid for the extra that they do put back into the grid, but I don't know that it's mandatory out here. It might just be a program that APS offers for those customers instead of taking them off the grid.
Yeah, a lot of people, it's called net metering, and net metering is the customer-centric rules that say, if you're going to charge me 70 cents a kilowatt, I should be able to sell you power at that same rate or equivalent or something close to it. A lot of states that don't have net metering rules will say, I will buy power at 76 cents a kilowatt from you, but if I do back, it'll be 15 cents for a kilowatt or something like that, which is, it. There's reasons why a utility does not want people to have their own power generation at their house because of, resident frequencies.
Yeah.
Sorry, getting off there, but there's harmonic issues that happen with small generations, and so they're trying to curb that.
No, I think to maybe bring it full circle, but I think it's not normally done by choice that they pigeonhole a customer into that, but I think it is. It all has
just a byproduct.
Yeah, it's a byproduct, and they are so large, like you said, that it's a bad review to Google is not going to mean anything at the end of the day.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Take Apple for an example, and I think for most people they seem to have good customer service. If you ask probably 10 out of 20 people, or 20 people, yeah, that was bad word.
Reduced your fraction.
You ask 20 people, you're going to get 18 that say, yeah, Apple has good customer service. So I think there's something to that, but I think at the same time, if Apple tomorrow was to start getting crappy customer service, you're not going to have people jumping ship all of a sudden. It's going to be, well, I like the iPhone. I like that, it's going to be that same,
You mean 2 years ago when they said, yeah, we purposely killed your battery so you'd buy new phones, and everyone goes, okay, I'll buy new phones.
Or the new ones that don't come with a charger, so if you're switching from another phone, it's just another accessory to buy. They do that all the time. And that's, I'll admit the whole reason I wasn't going to switch to another product if this thermostat didn't work out. I would have gone back to the old one if I needed a temporary solution until I could get this fixed, but I am invested in some of other areas of Google's ecosystem, so I'm not going to give up that in order to switch to a whole new platform.
Right.
So I'm part of that wouldn't have ditched Google just over this, but it was just interesting that customer service interaction to me compared to even 5 or 6 years ago. I had problems with one of their Google phones and they were significantly easier to work with, but that could also have just been the product itself easier to troubleshoot on their end than a hardwired thermostat. So
yeah,
it's understandable from that aspect.
Well,
jump to your topic, Tanner.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've
Good
all
topic,
seen
Dave.
this.
I like that.
It was. So mine's also starting with Google. And I don't know if you've seen this. It's in the news this week about an AI scientist, Timnit Gerbru, maybe. Apologize if I screwed that up, but you'll never talk to me anyway because you're so high above my stature. So I apologize. But anyway, she is the predominant AI scientist, was working at Google, has published many papers, and certainly was the go-to person. She's also a minority who is advocating on better representation in AI, not just in Google, but overall in the AI space. Again, this is not my question, but just to give you a little bit more backstory, essentially she was working on a collaborative paper written by several other authors. She contributed to that, and through that she was ultimately let go from Google. Her space, what's interesting to the question, has to do with ethics. And so you have a corporate employee who is working on emerging technology in the space of ethics while also representing diversity and inclusion. Now, all that said, here's the question. Do you feel that at some point companies need to or should have independent or third-party support for things such as HR, ethics, community, insert most of these hot topics? Do you think that it is able to manage that internally, or do you think that there's inherent conflicts that exist if an entity has ethical diversity, community, or otherwise, watchdog type organizations within its own folds?
I think it is important for them to contract that out to a third party just because of the potential conflicts of interest. I think a lot of companies do handle it well internally by having a non-biased HR policy and kind of an HR department that is in itself secluded from other departments. But if it's still at the same company, no matter what, even if you say they're separate from from the company and something happens that would come back negatively on the company or the individual, if they're not able to wholeheartedly separate that from the company itself, I think that raises potential red flags.
No, I think you've said that really well. I do, and it's hard when you're looking at like such a large company like Google, because even to contract that out, let's say fully, that contracting company has to be, you know, X size to be able to
Yeah.
handle some of that. So, in the creation of Google over time, I'm sure that HR department has grown, and I don't know. And do you know the answer to that? Are they do they have a contracted HR department, Tanner?
No, no,
No.
no.
So
There's really not a whole lot of people, if any, that I'm aware of that actually do have contract or third party or independent entities that deal with ethics within the workplace, and it's more of like a general question. And so because I know that we all would generally say in a perfect world, yes, you should be able to separate those two, but we know that the world we live in doesn't. There's an interesting case study from IKEA. Um, Everyone knows IKEA, but they're
Swedish horse meatballs.
so they basically they provide a really interesting supply chain structure in which they try and deliver cost to the consumer by eliminating waste and also trying to keep it somewhat beneficial for the environment. One of the things they ran into was because they're like you were leading to, Brandon, they're global, and so if you were to have a global entity that has third party support for you know HR related things, is that HR related support regional based? And I'll get to the case study as to why. But is it regional based? Is it globally based? Is it individual culture based? And how does that reflect on a global entity? Because a global entity can't absolve or otherwise represent individual cultures within their global operations. So they have to be able to separate those, which makes it complicated. This is where IKEA got into trouble. It releases catalogs, and it tailored its catalogs towards the Middle Eastern representation of what is acceptable within a family unit. Not to mention, the removal of females specifically was what they got in trouble for, and it begs an ethical question similar of what you might find in whether or not Google had with this AI diversity discussion is, at what level does a global company require representation to be outside of regional specific issues? And not saying that does regional specific issues matter, right? Or do they exist? Because we know they do. But I think it's not an easy answer. And then if you even set it apart, does it even matter? Because globally, you're going to be bundled all together anyway.
Yeah, so I think that aspect of contracting out could be a benefit in that scenario, because if you do have a global company that might not have headquarters in every major country that they operate in, because I know some do, a lot don't. So if you're able to contract those out at a smaller percentage in the countries that you do operate instead of having a whole operation, then maybe that would help rein in some of those cultural issues in one area versus another if you have those independent offices in each country versus relying on your own home HR
See, you found my trap
department.
that I laid for you. Now it goes based on a global company. If you have a cultural statement, does that mean that you're no longer liable for your corporate uh, culture if you could regionally scapegoat it?
I mean, I don't think it absolves you from that responsibility, but I can see how a lot of companies would take it that way.
Right. Because if you diversify enough, you have plausible deniability to say that you actually don't have a strong culture, and then that's where you run into issues of continuity between your brand. I'm playing devil's advocate just because it's fun at this point, but
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that it's really complicated, and as much as I feel for this worker who was, I think, performing duties as a leader in the industry for one. She is 100% a leader in the academic world. She's a leader for diversity and inclusion overall in the industry. I think, even though there's been several people, 1,200 Google workers and 1,500 additional who signed petitions against Google saying this was an unwarranted dismissal. It is interesting because then you have to say, was it operating in a facet of personal interest, personal, gain outside of the company while representing the company, which is different wholly than representation. So it's not clean by any means. I'm not trying to set a trap by, there's certainly both sides of it. I think one, they released emails from both sides and it's super messy, and
It's
Google
also,
screwed up.
yeah, it's also really hard to appease both sides because this isn't the first time Google's been in the spotlight for the same thing, leaning the other direction. I don't remember how long ago it was or when these articles were released, but I remember reading about Google internally censoring conservative viewpoints to an extent and releasing certain employees that didn't fall in line with that censorship because they felt it was wrong. And so,
Wasn't
Yeah,
this
I
I mean,
remember that.
Google is
the
not new for this.
pregnancy? Like women tend to.
No, I remember that, but this one was specifically, I don't know if it was one of their marketing directors or something like that, had a more conservative viewpoint and was not able to share it in the workplace because they banned that type of talk about. It was about some specific scenario. I just don't remember what exactly it was
Yeah.
at the time, and he was released for his unwillingness to cooperate with that censorship, if you want to call it that, in the workplace. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, I can think of a handful of accounts where Google has been in the hot seat for this before, and it's always for all different aspects. So in that case, I don't know if outsourcing it would even help because then you have scrutiny on this company that they outsourced it to that they might be leaning one direction
Well,
over the other.
that's when you first said that, I scaled it down in my brain to say a mom and pop shop that says I want to be I want to have an HR department and I want to we're growing and all of this, and one case goes the wrong way and that HR firm's fired from ever working with them again. Those type of situations where I look at, well, if the outcome isn't what you wanted, you may be going elsewhere to find this because of that.
So it wouldn't solve anything anyway because you're just going to be farming it out.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I took it as, and we hope that people, and I guess it depends on the situation as well, but I think overall you would hope people would be understanding and on the same page with a HR that hopefully is on the leading edge of policies and procedures for that area and that company and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I don't think to wrap up that topic, I don't think an independent HR group is necessarily going to solve anything either. I think that's a really good point, Brandon, to bring up. But I do wonder, the whole, is there a way that we could look at avoiding issues of conflict between, let's say, that regional based stuff, but also, as people right now, we're getting more cross-functional, not only our individual networks, but also, gig work is getting more prevalent. And as we put on our many different hats being the same individual, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think we should be tied to a specific organization for our value, right? Because I think people can work faster than the 9 to 5, and I think people could deliver more value if given the reins. And I think that we're going to see that. I think this pandemic, as we talked earlier, is going to go that way. I'm wondering what the HR landscape looks like if you have individuals who are affluent and involved in many organizations, as well as many other companies who are providing gig-like services. is there a way that you could effectively manage those human resources, ethical and otherwise cultural issues that come up?
Yeah, I just thinking of alone, I would hate to be in HR with, the way society's going and the cancel culture and the woke,
Yeah.
and all of that. I couldn't imagine being on the other end trying to manage that.
That is what I was going to bring up too, is when cultural shifts happen like this, and it is kind of volatile times, it's harder for anyone, whether a third party contractor or the company themselves, to handle that if opinions are going to change wildly, seemingly overnight in one direction or the other. It's harder to keep up with that no matter where you're coming from, especially as times get more polarizing, whether it's right or wrong on either side. It's just harder to manage in general. Like you said, it's hard enough to handle within your own personal circles, let alone if you're an entire company with hundreds of thousands of employees.
Yeah. So keep your head down. Don't talk to anybody. That work for everybody?
Yeah, man.
All right.
Don't go on a podcast. Just speak your mind. That's for damn
Don't
sure.
let your company find it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you spending this episode with us. Once again, this is Countertop Podcast, and we are on all the major streaming podcast sites: Apple Music, Spotify. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Add some comments, like, subscribe, ring the bell, all of that. So we will talk to you guys next week.